Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. George Russell has revealed his insight on the Mercedes preparation for 2023, stating he is absolutely sure they will be on the pace and in a strong position come the first race of 2023, far away from where they were at the start of last season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. One of the big updates of the day as well, coming from Aston Martin, confirming this morning the first launch date of the season. So we usually see this going into the new year at times. The teams will say, hey, we're launching our car this date in February, whenever it's going to be. Aston Martin, the first team to confirm that. The 13th of February will be the new launch date for next year's car. We'll see how good it looks, because this year's Aston Martin was pretty good looking. It was just terrible in qualifying at the start of the year. It improved an awful lot though. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Aston Martin go pretty heavy on the Red Bull copycat route. They kind of did it already this past season. Parts of their team that work on their car worked with Newey in the past. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring out a car that isn't the pink Mercedes, but it's rather the green Red Bull, which we already joked about earlier on this season when they brought an upgrade, or like their B car or whatever, that was remarkably similar to the Red Bull concept. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar thing come February the 13th at their new Silverstone campus, which is going to be finished, I believe, in 2025, but still indicative of Aston Martin's intent to compete with the front runners within the next few years. And they confirmed this. Chris Midland said it first, but they then confirmed it a couple of hours later that 13th of February, that is the first reveal date we have. Let's talk Mercedes then. Of course, we saw yesterday Mick Schumacher confirmed as their reserve driver for the season. Pretty cool stuff. They signed the contract. I guess this actually is the real contract here. I know I was talking about it yesterday, whether they're just signing a random piece of paper or not, but the way they were talking in this video seems like there was actually something legitimate to sign here, and that they did a nice interview of Mick Schumacher as well. So hopefully it works for him. I guess this is his kind of final chance, really. He's got to hope he can do a Nick de Vries, get a chance somewhere, show up, deliver the goods, and get a spot in another team. Mercedes have been pretty good at getting their drivers future opportunities, and who knows what happens within the Mercedes ranks. But of course, we're not expecting George Russell or even Lewis Hamilton to go anywhere anytime soon. Funny kind of screenshot that the Express News use here, but the quotes are still relevant nonetheless. On how Mercedes are going to fare going into the upcoming season, we've heard some hints out of the Mercedes camp what their car's going to be like, what we can expect it to look like, right, with the no side pod design they're probably going to keep around, and how confident they are for the upcoming season. George Russell has implied he's actually very confident indeed that next season's car will be competitive at every circuit. The issue was for this season's car that towards the end of the year it was pretty good, and even at the start of the year, the higher downforce circuits, for example Spain, certainly Zandvoort, certainly Hungary, they were pretty much there or thereabouts with, George Russell got his pole of course back in Hungary, and at the end of the year in Brazil, similar story. Mexico, high downforce track, similar story again. But any circuits with a long straight on it was absolutely terrible. And of course, Bahrain was not good for them at all. The long straights there, the bouncing issues they had, they were, many tenths, 6, 7-ish, at least tenths off the pace of the Red Bull and the Ferrari. And that was a Red Bull that was significantly overweight at the time. So not an impressive performance at that particular weekend. But George Russell says that from race 1, they will be in a much stronger position. He says, we got the philosophy wrong. We haven't forgotten how to build a fast car. Sometimes you've just got to dig yourself out of that hole. He says that they've now dug themselves out of that hole and are now building on top of that. So, it's interesting quotes just because George Russell will be there at the factory every day, speaking to the engineers, getting the insight of what they feel about the way they're developing the car, and some of that kind of knowledge and ideas will be brushing off in his comments that he makes to the media. Goes on to say, yes, they're a step behind Red Bull and Ferrari. We have got catching up to do, but we're definitely going to be in a much stronger position from race 1 next year than we were this year. So I don't know if he's really thinking in the terms of, okay, race 1 equals Bahrain equals, is our car actually going to be good at a circuit like Bahrain, or whether he's just thinking from the start of next season we're going to be much closer, if not on par, with the other cars than they were already. So, some positive signs from George Russell about what Mercedes could be delivering next season, and also stating that, it's great to have a team up with Lewis Hamilton. The relationship there is very good, learning a lot from each other, the confidence and trust in the organisation, and well, he's also attempting to go and win the championship, right? As he says, I'm here for the long haul, even though I would have wanted to fight for victories or wanted multiple victories and fighting for the championship last year. I think as a team, the struggles are only going to set us up nicer for the coming seasons. So I hope that I can look back in 10 years' time and say the 2022 season was a positive one for the journey. Not quite on the screen, but there you have it. You guys can read it at your own leisure. So that's the thing. Mercedes have got the drivers, they've got the team. Okay, their pit stops weren't great this season. Their strategy at times also wasn't great this season, but they've got most of the pieces to the puzzle. They just didn't have the car. If they do have the car, then Mercedes will be there again. They've got everything else going for them. They just didn't deliver the machinery this season, and even Toto Wolff has made it very clear that the W13 will have a special place in the team's collection, but very far towards the back where nobody can see it. But I believe in another interview he said that actually they're going to display the W13 quite proudly as a symbol of, you know, what happens when things can go wrong, like the bounce back potential of the team. Maybe it's even better to display the W13 as a symbol of that rather than kind of hide it in the background and pretend it never happened. It is a race-winning car at the end of the day, like all the other Mercedes in the recent eras before it. There are a few reasons why Mercedes should be able to be more competitive. Red Bull, of course, have their penalty. Ferrari are in a bit of, let's just say, disarray with the Fred Vasseur appointment. I think that Martin Brundle made the point the other day that, you know what, if I was Red Bull, if I was Mercedes, I'd be quite happy looking at Ferrari, just seeing that more than likely, yes, they might have a great car, but things behind the scenes are going to be quite, you know, volatile, let's say, for the next few months. The strategy team might get completely fired and another guy's brought in, which might be good in the long term, and I do have confidence Vasseur can do a good job there if he's given the freedom to make the decisions that he feels like he needs to. But for the short term, it could give Mercedes the step up they need to be the primary challenger to Red Bull next season, because I'm sure Red Bull are going to be one of the primary challengers, especially with Max Verstappen in the car. But they haven't necessarily been as dominant this past season, Red Bull, as some of the Mercedes seasons prior. Yes, you look at the numbers, you look at the race victories, but when you look at the overall race pace and especially the way the start of the season went, it wasn't an absolute slam dunk for Red Bull, just many mistakes for Ferrari and great driving from Verstappen, and having what was after the first 3 races a pretty much perfect car with no reliability issues, that set them up very nicely indeed for a cracking season, of course. Now, Ross Brawn, though, is not so convinced that as yet the cars will get that much closer together. We'll see how this goes over time, but the idea is now with the budget cap in effect, but also the testing time differentials between the teams at the front, they get less testing time than the teams at the rear of the grid, that should over time even up the divide on the grid. And Ross Brawn says the current divide is unacceptable, but it's going to take another year to really try and close that up, which I think is understandable. It's expected that into a new period of regulations, one team's going to nail it more than any others and do a better job, and they're going to be the team separating themselves from the pack. But at the same time, we did see a grid that wasn't incredibly stretched out, only a couple of seconds between the lap times of the cars, which is, you know, pretty big, but not anywhere near as big as we've seen even, let's say, a decade ago. So he's probably talking more here about the entire grid and the likes of Aston Martin and Alpha Tauri and these kind of teams further down, but even kind of bringing this discussion into a smaller frame, if you look at Mercedes versus Red Bull, probably thinking that, you know what, that difference in the testing time is not exactly going to make a major difference in a 1 year period, but it's more like over a 2 year period where that starts to take effect. So maybe this season won't be Mercedes time again, but it may happen at some point soon, and maybe even this season, who knows. Red Bull and Mercedes generally the best teams at developing their car in the latter half of the season to great success, and Red Bull have actually admitted that he reckons Mercedes, yeah, they'll be right there this year, but of course we'll see how that actually plays out in reality. Quick note as well on Red Bull, we saw the rumours the other day that they might be wanting to get involved with Red Bull potentially to rebrand their engine powertrain department into being Ford. Now, Ford have responded to this, or they've at least commented on this. Well, they've said they do not comment on speculative stories. They could just have ignored and not said anything. I think that some, you know, previous rumours when they have talked about getting involved in IndyCar and stuff, they usually just brush it off and say nothing. So yeah, just we do not comment on speculative stories. A little bit similar to what happened with Ferrari when they denied any of the speculation that Binotto was going to get fired, and then he did. So yeah, I don't know, just one to have a look at. And just 2 interesting things to close out the video. Firstly, this I thought was an interesting poll. Which of the midfield teams is most likely to break into the top 3 of Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari? Now, I didn't actually mean to vote McLaren here. I clicked it by mistake. I probably would have voted for Alpine, just because I feel like next season, Alpine are the team that probably are best positioned. I don't really have much confidence in McLaren, unfortunately. I wish I did, but, you know, looking at McLaren's most recent season, the fact that Andreas Seidel has dipped for Sauber because, you know, maybe he doesn't have so much confidence in that camp. I don't know really if I'm convinced that McLaren, especially without the new testing facilities, without the new wind tunnel they are building, I don't really know if it's going to be them that can make a competitive car this year. Alpine seem closer. They were on occasion pretty competitive with the Mercedes at times. There's maybe a chance they could get top 3. I don't think they'd be able to maintain that long term, but if there's one team out of these that probably has the best chance next season, I'd probably say Alpine. Long term though, I do think Aston Martin has a good chance. If I'm talking next season, I'd probably say Alpine. If I'm talking in the next 5 years, I might say Aston Martin. But yeah, definitely intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comment section below. And just to finish up with this, I'll keep you guys updated on this over the coming days. But race fans have done their top 20 drivers of the year. Nick Latifi, Riccardo, Mick Schumacher, Yuki Tsunoda gets 17th, then Joe Guanyu, Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas. And then I believe number 10 was Carlos Sainz, number 9 was Sergio Perez, kind of interesting one. And then number 8 was Esteban Ocon, I believe, with probably Vettel coming in 7th. With then Alonso, Norris, Russell, Hamilton, you know, Leclerc, Verstappen probably above that for the top 20. But hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.